The sterile air of the conference room chills me more than the late autumn outside. Rain lashes against the panoramic window, a fitting backdrop. Across the polished table, their faces are a gallery of shock, disbelief twisting into something ugly. My board members. And him. He opens his mouth, a soundless gasp tearing at the air. His eyes, wide and panicked, dart from the legal documents spread before him to my face. There's no recognition there, only terror. The woman beside him, the one who thought she'd won, pales, her carefully constructed poise shattering like cheap glass. Her name is Anya. His name used to be my life. They didn't see it coming. Not a single, solitary move. They thought I was just the naive wife, the busy CEO too wrapped up in her empire to notice the rot at its core. They were wrong. So wrong. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. And if you haven't already, please subscribe, it helps me more than you know. My world wasn't built on some inherited fortune or a lucky break. It was built, brick by painstaking brick, on sleepless nights fueled by stale coffee and a relentless belief in an idea. It was a tech company, focused on streamlining supply chains, a niche that required intricate knowledge, proprietary algorithms, and trust. So much trust. I started it in a garage that smelled faintly of oil and ambition. It grew, slowly at first, then with the breathtaking speed of something finally catching fire. Years bled into each other, marked by product launches instead of birthdays, milestones measured in market share, not anniversaries. I poured everything into it, my time, my money, my very identity. It wasn't just a company. It was the physical manifestation of my drive, my intelligence, my resilience. And beside me, through most of it, was Mark, my husband. He wasn't part of the core business, not technically. He worked in a different industry, something stable and predictable. But he was my sounding board, my late-night confidant. He saw the early struggles, the near failures, the moments I wanted to collapse under the weight of it all. He saw the triumph, too. The moment we landed our first major client, the day we went public. He was there, or so I believed, cheering me on, my rock, my safe harbor. Our home was a testament to the life we'd built. Not ostentatious, but comfortable, elegant. A place filled with quiet evenings, shared meals, the comfortable silence of two people who knew each other's rhythms. We talked about our days, his mundane meetings, my latest challenges. I shared everything with him. The triumphs, the frustrations, the strategic decisions, the core innovations we were developing. He listened patiently, offered simple, grounded advice that sometimes cut through the corporate jargon and reminded me of the human element. He was outside the bubble, and I valued that perspective. He had access, of course, not to the deepest technical blueprints, but to everything else. He saw the financials, the growth projections, the marketing strategies, the internal communications I sometimes left open on my laptop when I fell asleep on the couch. He knew the key players, the vulnerabilities, the next big leap we were planning. He knew me. Every hope, every fear, every detail of the empire I was building. I trusted him implicitly. He was my husband, the man I loved, my partner in life. What reason could he possibly have to ever betray me? The thought was alien, monstrous. It simply didn't exist in my reality. The first crack was so small, so insignificant I almost missed it. A flicker. Like a distant faulty light bulb you notice from the corner of your eye, but dismiss as nothing important. It was a Tuesday. I was working late, reviewing competitor analysis. Our main rival, Sterling Corp., was a lumbering giant, slow to innovate, relying on outdated tech. We were nimble, ahead of the curve. Their recent moves had been predictable, easily countered. But this report, it showed a sudden, sharp pivot in their strategy. A new product suite, announced quietly, that seemed eerily familiar. Not identical, but the underlying principles, the approach to solving a specific supply chain problem. It was too close to our Project Nightingale, something still deep in R&D, known only to my most senior team and a handful of trusted advisors. And Mark. He knew everything about Nightingale. I frowned, circling paragraphs, cross-referencing data. It could be coincidence, parallel development. It happened. But the timing, the specific nuances, it tickled a nerve. An unpleasant, prickly sensation at the back of my neck. Over the next few weeks, the flickers intensified. Small things. Mark became different. Distant sometimes. Fidgety. His phone was suddenly a third limb, always face down. Notifications silenced. He started working late, citing new projects, but the details were vague. His explanations paper-thin if I pressed. He smelled different sometimes. A perfume that wasn't mine, wasn't anyone I knew. I told myself it was just a colleague at his office, a new cleaning product, my imagination running wild from stress. CEOs are paranoid, right? It's part of the job. Then came the discarded receipt, tucked into the pocket of a jacket he rarely wore, one I was taking to the dry cleaners. It was for a ridiculously expensive bottle of champagne, purchased downtown, near Sterling Corp's headquarters, at a time he said he was at a conference across town. And the date was just days before Sterling announced their new product suite. My hands trembled as I held the slip of paper. Champagne. Near Sterling. While he lied about his location. The knot in my stomach tightened, cold and hard. It wasn't definitive proof of anything, not really. But it felt significant. A piece of a puzzle I didn't want to solve. I started watching. Subtly. Painfully. Not like a suspicious wife checking texts, though the urge was almost unbearable, but like an analyst looking for anomalies. I paid attention to his schedule, the sudden business trips that overlapped suspiciously with industry events Sterling was attending. I noticed the late-night calls he took on the balcony, speaking in hushed tones, ending abruptly if I came near. The man I thought I knew began to blur, replaced by a stranger composed of secrets and evasions. The comfortable silence in our home became strained, filled with unspoken questions, with the heavy weight of things unsaid. Every casual touch felt wrong, every shared laugh felt hollow. I was living with a ghost, a familiar form inhabited by an unknown entity. The most painful part wasn't the growing suspicion of infidelity. That was a separate, festering wound. It was the dawning horror that his deception might be linked to my company, my life's work. That the man who held my heart might also be holding the knife to my empire's throat. I hired a discreet private investigator. Not to follow Mark to see if he was meeting someone for coffee. I needed something concrete, something undeniable. I asked him to look into Sterling Corp, specifically their recent R&D projects and any unusual connections to people who shouldn't be connected. I didn't name Mark. Not yet. The word felt like a betrayal even thinking it. The investigator was efficient, professional. His initial report was bland, corporate jargon masking nothing remarkable. Sterling was doing exactly what a competitor would do, aggressively trying to catch up. But one detail snagged my attention. A newly hired consultant, brought in at significant expense, who seemed to have an uncannily deep understanding of niche supply chain technology. Her name was Anya Sharma, and she had a history of hopping between tech companies, leaving a trail of aggressive market moves in her wake. A quick online search revealed her photo. Stunning, polished, and disturbingly, sickeningly familiar from a photo I'd glimpsed on Mark's phone screen, quickly swiped away. The pieces slammed together with brutal force, knocking the air from my lungs. The stolen moments, the vague excuses, the champagne receipt, the perfume. Anya Sharma at Sterling, her new project, aligning perfectly with Nightingale. It wasn't just infidelity. It was corporate espionage. And Mark was involved. With his mistress. Using the secrets I had shared with him in the deepest trust of our marriage. The realization was like being struck by lightning, not the immediate searing pain, but the cold, dead numbness that follows, leaving you frozen in the wreckage. The man I loved, the man who slept beside me, who promised to cherish me, was systematically dismantling my life, using the knowledge I freely gave him to build up his lover's career and enrich himself. The world tilted. The polished surfaces of my home felt like shards of glass. The familiar scent of it was suddenly alien, tainted. Everything was a lie. Our marriage, his affection, His presence in my life, a carefully constructed facade hiding a monstrous betrayal. The pain was a physical weight, crushing my chest. It wasn't just heartbreak, it was the violation of every boundary, every vow, every expectation. He hadn't just cheated on me, he had fundamentally dismantled the foundation of my reality. He had taken the blueprints of my soul, laid bare in moments of vulnerability, and handed them to my enemy. Anger came next, hot and blinding, chasing out the numbness. It was a primal roar inside my head, a furious rejection of the victimhood he had thrust upon me. I wanted to scream, to smash things, to confront him with the evidence and watch him crumble. But years of leading a company, of navigating complex, high-stakes situations, kicked in. Emotion was a luxury I couldn't afford.
Not now.
This wasn't just personal, it was professional. My company, my employees, their livelihoods, they were all on the line. I had to think strategically. The first instinct, the emotional one, was to expose them, to ruin them both. But how? A messy divorce would drag my company through the mud, potentially revealing sensitive information inadvertently. Publicly accusing Mark of corporate espionage based on suspicion and a handful of clues would be difficult to prove and could easily backfire, destroying my reputation and the company's credibility. Anya and Sterling were already using my secrets. A direct, unsubstantiated attack would only give them more time and leverage.
No.
I needed more than revenge. I needed victory. I needed to save my company and ensure that they not only failed but were brought down by their own actions, leaving no doubt about what they had done. This required a cold, calculated plan. I didn't confront Mark. I couldn't, not only for strategic reasons but because I didn't know what I would do. The rage was a live wire. Any interaction would shatter my fragile composure. I maintained the facade. The loving wife, busy with work, slightly stressed, but oblivious. It was the hardest performance of my life. Sitting across from him at the dinner table, smiling, asking about his day, while knowing the depth of his deceit felt like swallowing glass. Every touch was repugnant, every word a carefully constructed lie from both sides. Our home became a battlefield of unspoken warfare, the silence thick with mutual, hidden agendas. I shifted my focus entirely to gathering irrefutable evidence. The private investigator became my shadow self, digging deeper, following digital trails. Corporate espionage leaves fingerprints. Emails, encrypted messages, data transfers, financial transactions, meetings documented in hidden calendars. It takes time, patience, and resources to uncover. I diverted company funds discreetly, under the guise of enhanced security measures and competitive intelligence analysis. No one questioned it. Protecting our IP was paramount, especially with Sterling's sudden surge. I also started working late again, but this time, my work was different. I wasn't just building the business. I was building the case against the man who shared my bed. I went through Mark's old devices, his computer, cloud storage he might have used. It felt invasive, a violation of the trust he had already destroyed, but I suppressed the discomfort. He had forfeited his right to privacy the moment he used my company's secrets to fuel his affair. The evidence accumulated slowly, damning piece by damning piece. Emails from Mark to a burner account, forwarded to Anya's personal email. Documents detailing Project Nightingale, sent from his home IP address. Records of large cash withdrawals from his personal account, coinciding with meetings with Anya. Whispers from inside Sterling's ranks about the uncanny insights of their new consultant. It was a tangled web of deceit, and I was meticulously untangling it. Meanwhile, the pressure on my company intensified. Sterling's new product, built on the bones of my innovation, was hitting the market hard. They were undercutting our prices, poaching our clients with offers we couldn't match because they hadn't borne the cost of years of R&D. Board meetings became tense. Questions were asked. Why were we losing market share? Why hadn't we anticipated this? Was our R&D falling behind? I deflected, spun narratives, bought time. I talked about aggressive competition, market shifts, the need to stay agile. My leadership was being questioned, my capabilities doubted. The empire I had built was teetering, and I had to pretend to be fighting an external enemy, while the real enemy was living in my house. The stress was immense, a constant, low-grade hum of anxiety under my skin. Sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford. Food tasted like ash. I was running on adrenaline and a burning cold fury. There were moments I faltered. Moments the weight of the betrayal and the professional crisis felt too heavy. I'd sit in my office late at night, the city lights blurring through the window, and feel utterly alone. The man I would have turned to for support was the source of my pain. The people I led couldn't know the truth. I was trapped in a gilded cage of my own making, watching my life unravel because I had loved and trusted the wrong person. But then I would look at the evidence I was gathering, the cold, hard facts of their betrayal, and the rage would return, sharper, clearer. They thought they were smart. They thought they had outmaneuvered me. They thought I was weak. They were wrong. They fundamentally underestimated me. They saw the wife, the woman who built a company. They didn't see the strategist, the fighter who had clawed her way to the top through sheer will. I wasn't just fighting to save my company anymore. I was fighting for vindication. For every woman underestimated, for every trust broken, for the principle that integrity, in the end, must prevail over deceit. This became my fuel. The pieces were finally falling into place. Enough evidence had been gathered to build a compelling case. Not just against Anya Sharma, but against Sterling Corp for benefiting from stolen trade secrets and potentially implicating Mark, though my primary target was Anya and crippling Sterling's illegal competitive advantage. The legal strategy needed to be precise. I couldn't directly sue Mark for espionage without making the divorce incredibly complicated and public in a way that could still harm the company. The goal was to use Anya and Sterling as the leverage, the dominoes that would inevitably expose Mark's complicity without me having to fire the first shot against him directly. I contacted the best corporate litigation lawyers money could buy, a firm known for their ruthless efficiency and discretion. I didn't go to my company's general counsel. I needed a team entirely separate, working outside the usual channels until the moment was right. I met with them in a sterile, anonymous office, presenting the mountain of evidence. Emails, data logs, financial records, the investigators' reports, timelines correlating Sterling's moves with Mark's activities and communications with Anya. They were initially skeptical, used to dealing with emotionally charged accusations that lacked substance. But as they reviewed the files, their expressions shifted. Skepticism turned to grim recognition, then to quiet determination. The evidence was compelling, meticulously gathered. It painted a clear picture of targeted, sophisticated corporate espionage, facilitated by an insider. "This is strong," the lead partner, a woman with eyes like flint, finally said, closing a binder. "Very strong. Enough to proceed." We discussed the strategy. A lawsuit against Sterling Corp and Anya Sharma. Damages for intellectual property theft, unfair competition, loss of market share. An injunction to halt the sale of their infringing products. The potential fallout. The media storm. And Mark. How to handle Mark. His involvement is clear from this evidence, the lawyer stated. He is potentially liable. However, pursuing him directly complicates things legally and publicly. Our strongest case is against Sterling and Ms. Sharma. By targeting them, we expose his actions indirectly. Sterling will have to cooperate to some extent to mitigate their own liability, and his connection to Sharma will inevitably surface in discovery. He'll be caught in the crossfire. It was perfect.
Clean.
Professional. It used the system to deliver justice, not through messy personal confrontation, but through the cold, hard mechanics of the law. They would be undone by their own paper trail, their own digital whispers. The timing was crucial. We needed to strike swiftly, blindsiding them, before they could destroy evidence or prepare a defense. We waited until Sterling was fully committed to their infringing product line, after they had invested heavily in marketing and distribution. The deeper they were, the harder the fall. Living those final weeks before the lawsuit was a unique form of psychological torture. I was a bomb timer, ticking down, maintaining a veneer of normalcy that was becoming increasingly brittle. Mark seemed relaxed, confident. Sterling's product was gaining traction. He likely thought they had gotten away with it. His casual ease was like a physical blow. He had destroyed our marriage, risked my company, all for this, and he felt no remorse, only the satisfaction of success. The thought fueled my resolve. He had no idea what was coming. The day we filed was strangely anticlimactic. No dramatic movie moment. Just a quiet confirmation from my lawyers that the papers had been served. A thick stack of legal documents delivered to Sterling Corp's headquarters and to Anya Sharma's apartment. The opening salvo in a war they hadn't known was coming. The real drama began when the news broke. A major tech company suing a rival for corporate espionage, citing detailed evidence of stolen trade secrets. The business news exploded. Headlines screamed. Analysts speculated. The stock market reacted. My board was in an uproar. I called an emergency meeting. Walking into that room felt like stepping onto a stage. All eyes were on me. They were angry, confused, blindsided by the lawsuit I had initiated without their full knowledge. "You sued Sterling?" the chairman demanded, his face flushed with disbelief. "For espionage? Why weren't we informed? What is this based on?" I remained calm, projecting a quiet confidence I didn't entirely feel. I took unilateral action because the evidence was irrefutable and timing was critical to prevent further damage. We have suffered significant losses due to Sterling's illegal use of our proprietary technology. My priority was protecting the company. I had copies of the key pieces of evidence prepared. Not the full dossier, but enough to be convincing. Emails, data logs, reports from the private investigator, anonymized, of course. I laid them out, explaining the technical details, the correlation with Sterling's product launch, the clear signs of insider information. "The evidence points to a systematic theft of our R&D," I explained, my voice steady. "Facilitated by an individual with access to privileged information." I didn't name Mark.
Not yet.
I let the evidence speak for itself. The room was silent as they absorbed the implications. The shock shifted to anger, directed at Sterling, at Anya Sharma. The narrative was changing. I wasn't the CEO whose company was failing. I was the CEO who was fighting back against illegal sabotage. Then Mark walked in. He wasn't a board member, but he had accompanied me to these meetings before, a silent support. He looked pale, distracted. He'd probably just seen the news. His eyes met mine, and for the first time in months, I saw something real in them. Pure, unadulterated panic. He knew. He knew I had done this. He knew this lawsuit, targeting Anya, was a direct threat to him. The meeting continued, details of the lawsuit, the potential impact. Mark sat on the periphery, his face gray. He tried to catch my eye, to signal something, but I kept my gaze fixed on the board members, addressing their concerns, outlining the legal strategy. The climax wasn't a sudden scream in that moment. It was a slow, agonizing burn for him. He had to sit there in the same room as me as I calmly explained the corporate espionage case that was built on his betrayal, the case that targeted the woman he was having an affair with, the case that would inevitably expose his role. He was trapped. He couldn't speak up without confessing. He couldn't object without raising suspicion. He could only sit and listen as his world, so carefully constructed on lies, was dismantled piece by my deliberate hand. After the meeting, the board members dispersed, buzzing with a mixture of apprehension and grim satisfaction. Justice, even this cold, legal form, felt powerful. Only Mark and I remained in the room. The rain had stopped. The city lights reflected in the wet streets below. The silence between us was deafening, heavy with years of shared history and recent, profound betrayal. He finally spoke, his voice hoarse, barely a whisper. You did this." I looked at him, at the man I had loved, the man who had so casually thrown it all away. There was no anger left in me, only a vast, cold emptiness where love used to be, and a sharp, clean sense of victory. "I did," I said, my voice steady, devoid of emotion. "They stole from me, Mark. They used my trust, my hard work, everything I built. What did you expect me to do? He stared at me, his eyes wild. But Anya and me, they'll find out. Yes, I confirmed, the word hanging in the air between us like a guillotine. They will. That's usually what happens when you commit corporate espionage with your mistress. And that's when he screamed. It wasn't a roar of anger, but a strangled, guttural sound of pure, animalistic terror and defeat. He screamed her name, my name, words dissolving into incoherent cries. He screamed about how this would ruin him, ruin her, ruin everything. He screamed about how I couldn't do this, how I was destroying him. He stood there, a man broken not by my direct accusation of infidelity, but by the cold, strategic unraveling of his criminal plot. He hadn't feared my heartbreak. He feared the consequences of his greed and treachery catching up to him through the legal system I had weaponized. He hadn't cared about destroying our marriage, but he was terrified of destroying his reputation, his comfortable life, the life he had risked everything to protect even as he betrayed me. His screaming filled the sterile room, bouncing off the glass walls, a raw, ugly sound that was the antithesis of the controlled environment I operated in. It was the sound of a man who had finally realized the full cost of his actions, not just emotionally, but legally and financially. He was blindsided. Utterly, completely blindsided. He thought he was playing a clever game, stealing secrets, building a new life with Anya on the ruins of mine. He never considered that I would see it, understand it, and use the very rules he broke to dismantle him. He collapsed into a chair, burying his face in his hands, his screams turning into ragged sobs. I watched him, feeling nothing. The man I had loved was gone, replaced by this pathetic, broken figure. The betrayal was too deep, the damage too extensive for pity. The lawsuit against Sterling and Anya Sharma proceeded. The evidence was overwhelming. Sterling, facing massive financial penalties and a potentially devastating injunction, settled quickly. They paid a substantial sum, issued a public apology acknowledging improper access to proprietary information, and terminated Anya Sharma's contract. Anya herself faced a separate lawsuit for damages and professional misconduct. Her career in the tech industry was over, her reputation destroyed. As for Mark, the legal process, the discovery phase of the lawsuit, the internal investigation at Sterling prompted by the settlement, it all painted a very clear picture of his role. While I didn't sue him directly for espionage, the fallout from the case was immense. His employer launched an internal investigation, his reputation was in tatters, and the financial cost of the divorce, coupled with potential civil action from Sterling, who might well try to recoup some losses from him, meant his comfortable life evaporated. He lost his job, his standing, everything he valued more than our marriage or my trust. Our divorce was quiet, swift, and entirely one-sided in my favor. There was no fight left in him. He had already lost the war. The company stabilized. With Sterling's infringing product off the market and the settlement providing a financial cushion, we were able to recover. Project Nightingale was successfully launched, proving its worth and restoring confidence in our innovation pipeline. My position as CEO was more secure than ever, my reputation enhanced by my decisive action in protecting the company. But the victory felt cold. Satisfying, yes, deeply, profoundly satisfying to see them undone by their own malice. But also hollow. The cost had been immense. Not just financially, but emotionally. The trust was gone. Not just with Mark, but a part of me had become permanently guarded, wary. The world looked different, sharper, more dangerous. I had saved my company, but I had lost my naivete, my belief in unconditional trust. I sit in my office now. The city lights a familiar comfort. The rain has passed, leaving the air feeling scrubbed clean. My company is thriving. Mark and Anya are gone from my life. Ghosts of a past I survived. I won the battle, secured the future of my company, and delivered a kind of justice that was perhaps colder but ultimately more effective than any emotional confrontation. Sometimes, late at night, I think about that scream. That moment he realized he hadn't just hurt me, but had sealed his own fate through his hubris. It's not a sound I relish, but it is a reminder. A reminder that lies have a cost, that betrayal leaves a trail, and that the person you underestimate can sometimes be the one who holds all the cards in the end. If this story hit close to home, I'd love to hear your version. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. Thanks for being here. Subscribing helps bring more of these to life.